The crowd outside the botanical gardens was thick as flies. It was a motley collection of townies and Christmas sweaters and jeans, long coats and thick jackets, boots and sneakers, and all of them with steaming mugs of hot chocolate from an industrious truck that had been set up on the edge of the parking lot. The Christmas trees poked over the wall of the park, a group of silent sentinels just waiting, and the people outside milled about anxiously. They all remembered the Halloween display and were anxious to see what the garden had in store for them this year. They wouldn't have to wait for long. I looked up as someone called my name, and I saw the familiar trio of Marcus, Grandpa, and Glimmer standing by the gate, and I raised my own greeting. "Right on time," Marcus said, extending a hand to shake.
"It's good to see you again, John."
Marcus looked at her strangely, chuckling a little as she turned to look back at him.
"What?"
"Nothing. I just assumed he'd get a nickname too, I guess."
Not everyone gets a special name, Hunter. John can have one when he earns one.
Marcus laughed, shaking his head as he took her by the arm, and they went inside. Grandpa cackled as the two headed into the park. "They make a lovely couple. I hope I live to see them wed." I fell in beside him as the two of us headed inside, the older man limping a bit as we looked at the trees. "Is that a concern?" I asked, looking up and thinking they were kind of plain. "At my age, a hard sneeze could do it. I'm old, John. Hopefully you make it there yourself one day. Then you'll understand. Hopefully, though, I've got many years left to me. Don't doubt. You all won't get rid of me that easy." He started coughing a little then, ruining the illusion, and I stopped to let him finish. He wiped a hand across his mouth. Just a little late on my evening breathing treatment, that's all," he assured me. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say, and when he was ready, we moved on. The congregation of townies was moving towards the back of the park, and we fell in with them as Marcus and Glimmer slowed down to wait for us. It was a pretty good turnout for what amounted to a Christmas tree lighting in a small town, and the deeper we went, the more festivities unfurled. There was a gingerbread house all decked out with lights, some large candy canes that I thought must be real by the way they were sweating, and a bunch of those hairy people dressed as nutcrackers and ballerinas and other Christmas characters. They looked ridiculous, like satyrs from Greek myth, but they were nothing compared to the little whatevers that were dressed as elves. These squat little creatures were walking around in bright-colored garb, growling at people who got too close, and generally being a surly little group of strangeness. I chuckled, enjoying the little holiday show before Grandpa leaned in and whispered to me, "You can see them too, can't you?" I looked down, suddenly shivering, with a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Are they ghosts? No, but they are under a glamour. Normal people just see normal people, men and women in costumes, but those of us who can see through the veils and glamours can see them for what they really are." "And what are they?" I asked, smiling at a pair of them that were dressed as gingerbread men. "The lady called them Brandylow. They look a little like the goat men from the old stories, but they appear to be people that she has made into something more with her power. They follow her dutifully enough, like chicks to a mother hen, and she leads them. The little ones are gnomes, nasty little blighters, but they seem to love her enough not to hurt people. They're harmless enough as long as they're on your side. Be careful, though, if you see anything out and about. Things that hide themselves don't usually like being noticed, and they might react badly if they realize that you can see 'em too." I nodded, tucking that away as I headed deeper into the park.
"It sounds so wondrous. I am always so enchanted by you humans and your winter celebration."
I've seen the cave you live in, Glim. It's not exactly drab.
Yes, but we don't really do things like this. The winter is often a time for sadness, and festivals are usually saved for the spring for those who are left.
Remind me to send you back with some canned goods, Marcus added quietly. Glimmer started to say something, but suddenly her skin seemed to buzz like a cell phone. It was a little dizzying to watch, and when she turned around, her lips were pulled back in a feral snarl. This was the hunter that fed the village. This was the warrior that protected them. And, if needed, she would do it again.
Something is here. Something is not right.
She pulled Marcus behind her, dropping a hand to her knife, and I turned with Grandpa to see the therapist? I knew who Dr. Winters was. She came to the hospital to do psychiatric evaluations sometimes, but she had traded her pantsuit and sensible shoes for a long red and green dress that looked more at home in the current setting. Her date was no less beautiful, a pale woman in a dark blue dress that looked like old ice inside a glacier. The two had stopped about 30 feet from us, Dr. Winters vibrating in a similar fashion, and when Grandpa put a hand out, Glimmer settled a little at his touch, and it was a welcome relief. "Why, Dr. Winters, so good of you to join us," Grandpa said, smiling wetly. "Almost feels like deja vu." Dr. Winters settled herself and returned the smile. "Good to see you, old man, and your apprentice, too, along with this charming creature. Oh, this is Glimmer. She's my apprentice's betrothed and a hunter for the moon elves that live here in the mountains." "A pleasure to make your acquaintance," Dr. Winters said. "Haven't seen a moon elf in a while. It's good to see you haven't been wiped out. They're fine warriors, and the world is better for their presence." That seemed to unbristle her a little, and as the woman and her escort fell in with us, she introduced her. "This is Marguerite, my partner. I think some of you have met." "I don't think we had a lot of time for pleasantries last time," Marcus said. "Last time we saw each other, we were both fighting for our lives, as I recall." Marguerite smiled at him. "Let's make this gathering a little less hectic, yes?" I wanted to ask what they were talking about, but we had come to the place, it seemed. We came to a frozen lily pond, the lilies stuck in suspension beneath the ice, and standing on the surface, her pale blue gown seeming to float, was the loveliest woman I had ever seen. She was simultaneously young and middle-aged all at once, looking girlish as well as seasoned, beautiful and graceful, a woman of undeterminable age that time had been kind to. She was flanked by 3 of the furry satyr people Gramps had called Brandylow, and they wore togas. One had a red stole, one had a green stole, and the third wore a blue stole, something I assumed was a mark of office. "Welcome, friends and neighbors. We're so glad to have you at our first official tree lighting ceremony." The townies clapped, and we joined them lustily enough. "Without further ado, I bring you the lighting." She raised her hands, and suddenly the rows and rows of pine trees were covered in lights. The boughs sprouted ornaments, candy canes, and strings of popcorn and tinsel. The lights blazed in so many colors that it was almost eye-watering. Suddenly the world was on fire, awash with lights, and even the most jaded of the townsfolk looked on in wonder at the spectacle. I had to admit it was quite a show, almost like magic, but after what I'd seen at the hospital, it was little more than a parlor trick. Despite that, even Grandpa looked amazed. It took 50 years off of him, so he only looked about 100. "Enjoy this evening's festivities, everyone. Those who are coming to the event to follow, please join me on the ice." As the crowd dispersed, our party approached the frozen lake with the good doctor in tow. Another form moved up from the left on its own, in an immaculate pinstriped suit. Dr. Winters hissed as she caught sight of him, but the man's answering smile was warm and predatory. "Dear sister, what is this? Is the holiday season not a time for visiting one's family? Considering the last time I saw you was when you tricked me into helping you with a troublesome ghost, I don't think I want to see you." The warden of Stragview rolled his eyes. "Such dramatics. Our kind taught this rabble about misleading. What made you think we were immune to it?" Winter tossed her head and walked on, Marguerite hot on her heels. "And you," the warden said, "you must be that old mountain man from the little fracas last year. Good to finally meet you." "I wish I could say the same," Grandpa said, his voice sounding stony. "You must be the big bug I've always felt around the prison. It's the reason I never go anywhere near it." The warden was smiling, but his eyes did not reflect it. Grandpa had struck a nerve. "Go on ahead," Grandpa said after a few seconds had passed. "I'd just as soon not have you at my back." The warden shrugged, walking towards the water as easily as he must walk the grounds of his compound. I had never met the man. He did not usually accompany his inmates to the hospital, but it appeared that Grandpa knew him. Marcus bent down and whispered something to Grandpa, and the old man made a non-committal noise before heading in behind him. Glimmer took Marcus's offered arm, and I followed in the back of the group as we approached the lady. She smiled as she saw Grandpa, but I stopped as the warden walked past her and suddenly disappeared. He was there one moment, and then poof, he was just gone the next. It was a little confusing, but as I stumbled after the pair, I assumed that all would be explained. Tales of fae traps I had seen on TikTok begun to go through my head, but if there was a group of people you probably didn't want to trap, it was likely these guys. "Magus, you and your apprentice be welcome," the lady said, spreading her arms wide. "Who are your guests?" Grandpa turned to indicate me. "This is my friend, John, and this is my apprentice's intended, the moon elf, Glimmer." "Lovely," the lady said, shaking Glimmer's hand. "And John, be welcome and accept safe passage and the protection of my house as you enter Fae." I bowed, feeling a little nervous about the whole entering Fae thing. We walked towards the same place where the warden had vanished, and as we stepped through the space, we were suddenly within a shimmering space in full bloom. We had stepped from a winter wonderland to a snowy garden full of plants that I was pretty sure weren't supposed to grow this time of year. The people here were, well, they were fantastic. Glimmer was beautiful, but these people were unearthly. They were like living statues, set to eat and drink and mingle. I saw some of Glimmer's people mingling amongst them as well, and they seemed poor copies of the much more beautiful Fae. They hovered around the tables, eating snacks and drinking from glass chalices, but even so, there was a clear division between them. "These are," Grandpa said, sounding amazed. "The Fae courts," the lady said, as she and her advisor stepped in behind us. "They are being less than social, though." "Why the hell would you invite both of them?" Grandpa said. "Seems like a bad idea." "Well, Titania is my patron, and one does not simply snub Queen Mab. I did not believe she would accept, honestly. She never has before, and I had no reason to believe that this time would be any different." Dr. Winters was mingling with a small group of fairies in green armor, laughing and swirling her wine as they talked about something. The warden was standing by the refreshment table, but it appeared that he did not share her outgoing nature. He sipped his wine and looked like he wasn't really sure why he had come. The group of fairies, dressed in dark blue and purple, were giving him a wide berth, and I suspected that Gramps had the right of him. Whatever he was, I wasn't the only one that could feel it. The lady raised her wine glass, something that had materialized from nowhere, and struck the side to bring out a long, high note. The guests looked up, raising their own glasses, and I was a little surprised to find that I had one too. It had just appeared in my hand. Gosh, like magic. And when she smiled at us, it felt like a summer breeze in July. I want to welcome all of you to my winter celebration. It isn't something I do often, but I feel it is good to stand in the face of your adversaries and revel in such attention. I am proud to welcome not only my queen and her court, but our friends of the winter court, as well as Queen Mab. A tall woman with a wash of dark hair raised her glass in salute. She was on a whole other level. Her dress looked to be made of ice at the heart of a glacier, and her feet covered in boots of living midnight. She was the statue that had been the base for the rest of her people, all beautiful angles and hauntingly pale skin. But I didn't need to look at her with my sight to know that that was something she wore for polite company. If I were to see her for what she truly was, it would probably melt my brain or send me to the loony bin, and I looked away from her with real effort. So I invite you to mingle, to rejoice, and take all this night to put aside your differences, to Yuletide, she said, lifting her glass, and to new friends. They all repeated the sentiment and drank, as did we, and when no other toasts were called, the mingling continued. The lady lowered her glass, looking unsure as she took a sip. I had hoped for a more spirited response. "It is summer and winter, my lady," one of the advisors said, the goatier of the three, who appeared to have a stole of green piping. "They will never hold more than tentative bonds." "I suppose," she said, turning back to Grandpa and our group. "This is Tobias, my head botanist. Randy, I believe you know, and our new diplomat to the court, Samuel." All of them traded grips with Grandpa and Marcus, the Brandy-Low and the Blues saying it was fine to just call him Sam. "It's strange," Marcus said. "I never thought to get your name before now." Sam shrugged. "We were a little preoccupied the last time. We had reason to be together." "Very true. Squashing pumpkin heads and fending off green knights."
"Huh? Seems like everyone's invited to this battle except for me."
Marcus shook his head. "I told you, Glim, it wasn't something we set out to do." The two of them started in on a story of this war of winter that they had all been a part of, Glimmer hanging on to him as though hearing a lot of this for the first time. And Grandpa and I decided to head to the snack table. I hadn't eaten lunch. I was pretty excited. And when Grandpa loaded a plate from the overflowing platters, I figured it was probably safe to do the same. I guessed that they probably wouldn't be so overt as to try to trap us with food, and found most of it to be pretty tasty. "You feeling anything, kiddo?" Grandpa asked. I swallowed the honeydew melon I had been eating and shook my head as I looked around the gathering. "Nothing out of the ordinary, I guess, which I guess is something. This place is like the hospital. There's just so much energy around here that it's hard to tell what's weird and what's not." Grandpa nodded. "The Fae are like that. Glimmer even has her own low-level current, but you're so surrounded by major energy that it probably is being lost. You'll get used to it, kid. It takes some practice." I looked around at the devastatingly beautiful creatures that milled about and stared daggers at each other, and shook my head. "Is it always like this?" Grandpa laughed, spraying crumbs. "Yeah, no, kid, it's not always this peaceful. Most times there's a buggin' of some kind or a shag nasty of another that needs blasting into pieces." A little girl came running up then and gave Grandpa a big hug. "Merry Yule, sir! It's good to see you again." Grandpa smiled and tousled her hair. "And you, my lady." A woman, a moon elf I was pretty sure, moved up behind the girl in a long and elegant dress. Grandpa bowed as best he could with the little girl hugging him, and I did the same, It was always a good rule of thumb to bow to the people that Grandpa showed deference to. "My queen, happy Yule." "Oh, stop that," she said. "You are an honored guest amongst my people, Magus, and your apprentice is all but family." Grandpa smiled and straightened. "I wish I could have been there to see it." "We hope you will someday," the queen said. "We would be honored to host you." Grandpa smiled and returned, but it was twinged with sadness. "I, too, would like that, but I do not know if it will ever be." They wished him a merry Yule, and then they went back to mingling. "Who was that?" I asked. "That is the queen of the Moon Elves, and her daughter, Princess Gabriella." "You just know everybody, don't you?" I asked with a laugh. Grandpa winked. "Never doubt it, kid." So, we spent the evening by the snack table. Eventually, Marcus and two of the ladies' attendants wandered over with Glimmer, and we made our own little circle. Dr. Winters and her partner joined us at some point, but the warden seemed to have struck up a conversation with some of the Winter Fae, and thankfully did not join us. When our hostess came over, Tobias in tow, she looked flustered and a little disheartened. "It seems that none of them will mingle. Titania told me it would likely be this way, but I had hoped that maybe they would warm a little as the night went on. It seems that is not to be, though." "Such is the way of our kind, my lady," said a voice from behind her. We all turned to find the painfully beautiful Queen of Winter standing a few feet away, flanked by attendants. "Your Majesty," the lady said, bowing, "I trust my party is to your liking." "Most enjoyable for a winter affair. I need to speak with you on a matter of some importance." The lady nodded. "I'm honored that you would seek my counsel." "Hold your honor. You haven't heard the request yet. There is a member of my court who wishes to parley. This member wishes to come under a banner of peace so that they may negotiate with you." I felt something then, a tingling along my spine like a winter chill. "And who would this individual be?" the lady asked, her demeanor turning icy. "Before I tell you, I would like an assurance of safe conduct. This individual is worried that you might react badly to them if they came to speak with you alone." The lady glanced at her advisors. The one in the red stole just shrugged before sighing and pulling her lower lip into her mouth. "As long as I have their assurance of safe conduct as well." Queen Mab nodded. "I will grant that. Do you agree to parley?" "I will," the lady said, looking around as if to ensure she had a crowd watching. She clearly didn't want to meet this person by herself. Queen Mab glanced back at the space where we had all come in through, and the cold in the area intensified. I saw many of the plants begin to wither and die. Her three attendants gathered around her, and I saw Marcus and Grandpa edge a little closer to Glimmer as she drew the same knife that I had seen her threaten the ghost girl with. Dr. Winters and her friends seemed ready themselves, and to my surprise, even the warden moved a little closer to our group. Through the portal, materializing like a mirage, came someone I had only heard about in stories. He ducked a little as he came through, and he had thankfully not ridden his horse. He was unarmed, but it hardly mattered. He could have crushed most of us easy enough, and the snow that fell on his green armor began to stick. He was an imposing figure, to be sure, and there was little in the way of humanity about him. He was strangely expressive for someone in a helmet, and I could almost see his metal face mask grin. "My lady, I see you recovered from your injuries." The lip came out of her mouth, her teeth coming together in a snarl. "You have some nerve coming here. What possible reason could you have for coming into my domain to threaten me?" "Threaten? Oh no, my lady. I have not come to threaten. I've come to offer you the one thing I know you desire most. And what might that be? The helmeted head seemed to grin again as he hissed out the last thing I had ever expected. Peace. Season's greetings, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. I do hope you've enjoyed our Cashmere Christmas. Much like the lady, I didn't put on quite as much as I had meant to, but I do hope that you'll be happy with the final product, and I do hope you'll join us next week as we see what plays out between the Green Man and the lady. So, from my home to yours, a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year, and I hope to see all of you in 2025. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.